All right, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahawashi, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahawashi, Kohala Yahawashi Yahawashi. Double honesty, apostles of great millstone, and salutations to you brothers that's pushing the word in sincerity and truth. This is another episode of History and the Law, where I go into the history. Sometimes we bring out the law, as the spirit, works. But here's a example of the apostles and the persecution. Example of our forefathers, in this case Paul, okay? And this is back during the time of the book of Acts, during the time of Paul being a prisoner of Yahawashi, okay? And what he had to go through. So we just want to bring out an example in the scriptures and show you, and then bring out precepts, because you got to remember that Yahawashi forewarned the men that followed him what would befall them, okay? So this is the book of Acts, the 14th chapter. It says, and it came to pass in Iconium that they went both together into the synagogue of the Jews, and so spake that a great multitude both of the Jews and also of the Greeks believed. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. And it says, long time therefore abode they speaking boldly in the Lord, which gave testimony unto the word of his grace, and granted signs and wonders to be done by their hands. But the multitude of the city was divided, in part held with the Jews, and part with the apostles. So you had these men, they were speaking the words of Yahweh by Shem Yahawashi in the synagogue, and you had both it said both of the Jews and also of the Greeks believed. So you had believers back then, and then you had people that were non-believers, and you had a division. Some believed in what the apostles were speaking and believed in the miracles that they were doing, and then you had some that held fast to the scribes and the Pharisees, the wicked scribes and the Pharisees. Okay? It says long time, but this is back in verse 3 again. I'm going to read verse 2 again. It said, but the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. So you had going back to, you had a division, and you had Jews that were stirred up against the Gentiles. Now these Gentiles, they were Israelites. They were Israelites, okay? It says, and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. Long time therefore abode they speaking boldly in the Lord, which gave testimony unto the word of his grace, and granted signs in his grace. Signs, Salakia, which gave testimony unto the word of his grace, and granted signs and wonders to be done by their hands. So Yahweh by Shem Yahawashi was working with these men. The spirit of Yahweh by Shem Yahawashi was on these men, and they had so much faith that the Lord gave them the spirit to show signs and wonders, man. Verse 4, but the multitude of the city was divided, in part held with the Jews, and part with the apostles. And when there was an assault made both of the Gentiles and also of the Jews with their rulers, to use them despitefully and to stone them, right? They were aware of it, and fled into Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, I can't, hold on. Laconia, and unto the region that lieth round about. So Yahawashi warned that these things would happen, where they would want to scourge them and kick them out the synagogue. And I got a precept. This is let's go to Matthew's 10 and 23 real quick. This is the book of Matthew 10 verse 23. I'm gonna start at the top. I'm gonna start verse 16, 10 verse 16. It says, now this is Yahawashi speaking. It says, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to their council, and they will scourge you they will scourge you in their synagogues. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what ye shall speak. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the children, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end, this end shall be saved. But when they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man come. So that applied back then, and that applies now in these times that we're in. But what we're reading in the book of Acts was an example of what Yahawashi spoke to him aforetime and said, this is what will happen to you. Now, this is going back into the book of Acts, the 14th chapter, verse 4. It says, but the multitude of the city was divided, and part held with the Jews, and part with the apostles. And when there was an assault made both of the Gentiles and also of the Jews with their rulers, to use them despitefully and to stone them, they were aware of it, and fled unto Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, I believe that's the name of the city, and unto the region that lieth round about. So they when they got wind that men wanted to put them to death by stoning them, they fled to other cities. And it says, and there they preached the gospel, right? Pursuant to the scriptures. Now let's go into another scripture. This is John 15:20. It says, remember the word that I said unto you. Yahawashi speaking again. The servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my sayings, they will keep yours also. So Yahawashi, because Yahawashi was persecuted the same way, back in Acts the 14th chapter. This is verse 8. And there sat a certain man at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple from his mother's womb, who never had walked. The same heard Paul speak, who steadfastly beholding him, and perceiving that he had faith to be healed. Now this is 9. Let's see. Let me go to quickly go to Matthew 8 and 10. Let's see what Matthew 8 and 10 says real quick. The apostles were actually living out what Yahawashi said aforetime will happen to his men. And we are supposed to, by reading these scriptures, like the scriptures say, the things that are written aforetime were written for our learning, Okay, so the precept they gave me in this red Bible was Matthew 8 and 10, and it said, when Yahawashi heard it, he marveled and said to them that followed, verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. Now this is when the centurion came unto Yahawashi. And but similar events took place when Paul, just like the impotent man heard Paul. I'm gonna read it again. It said, and there sat a certain man at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple. So a cripple heard Paul is from his mother's womb, who never had walked. The same heard Paul speak, who steadfastly beholding him and perceiving that he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, stand upright on thy feet. And he leaped and walked. So this man had faith, man. This man had faith. When he seen Paul, he had faith that Paul was a man of the Lord. Verse 11. And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying, in the speech of Lycaonia, the gods are come down to us in likeness of men. And they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercurius, because he was the chief speaker. Then the priest of Jupiter, which was before their city, brought oxen and garlands unto the gates, and would have done sacrifice with the people. See, these people in Lystra, they were idol worshippers. And when they saw the marvelous works that Paul did, they thought Paul was Jupiter. Hold on, let me see. No, they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercurius. You know. And see, then they had a chief priest of Jupiter come unto him and bring sacrifices for them. But they did not knowing that they did this work in Yahawashi. Okay? All of these works. And here it is, these men, speaking of Paul and Barnabas, they were about to be stoned in another city. They went to another city and they got, they were critically acclaimed, or the people saw the works that Paul and Barnabas did, which was of Yahawashi. Okay? This is verse 14. It says, which when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of, they rent their clothes and ran in among the people, crying out and saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities. Yup. Believing in these false gods. You're supposed to turn from these vanities, because it wasn't Jupiter and Mercurius that did these works. It was the works of Yahawashi through faith. It says, and saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living power, the living God, which is Yahweh, which made heaven and earth and the sea and all things that are therein. Verse 16, who in times past suffered all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, he left not himself without witness, in that he did good and gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filled our hearts with food and gladness. And with these things scarce restrained they the people, that they had not done sacrifice unto them. Verse 19, and there came thither certain Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who persecuted the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. Howbeit, as the disciples stood round about him, he rose up and came into the city, and the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe. So you had men that came out of Iconium and what is this? What is the other city? Men in Antioch, Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. So they thought he was dead. Okay, now let me see. Let's see real quick. Let's see, what is this? Okay. Let's see, 1 Corinthians, no, it's 2 Corinthians 1 and 8. 2 Corinthians 1 and 8. Yeah, 2 Corinthians 1 and 8. This is Paul speaking. It says, for we would not, brethren, have you ignorant of our trouble which came to us in Asia, that we were pressed out of measure above strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life. But we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, who raised the dead, who delivered us from so great a death, and doth deliver, in whom we trust that he will yet deliver us. And Paul had the authority to speak, because they they went to stone Paul, and the scriptures say Paul was caught up to the third heaven. The Most High brought Paul back in the spirit, man. The Most High preserved Paul's life, so Paul had that authority to speak, because he went through it. Okay. All right. So this is verse 21. And when they had preached the gospel to that city and had taught many, they returned again to Lystra. So they went right back into Lystra, into Iconium and Antioch. Verse 14. Confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of Yahawashi. Hey, so that was a great thing of faith. They went back into the city that they had to flee from, man. And the scriptures say confirming the souls of the disciples, you know, the men that were following them, and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and telling them that we through much tribulation shall enter into the kingdom of heaven. So this thing is not going to be easy. Dang, can you imagine that? Can you imagine the mentality of it? But they witnessed the power of Yahawashi. Back then they was working the miracles, you know. Verse 23. It says, and when they had ordained them elders in every church and had prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord, on whom they believed. And after they had passed throughout Pisidia, they came to Pamphylia. Mind you, this is all in Asia Minor, the area of Turkey, over there by the Black Sea. It says, and when they had preached the word in Perga, they went down in Attalia, and then sailed to Antioch, from whence they had been recommended to the grace of Yahweh for the work which they fulfilled. And when they were come and had gathered the church together, they rehearsed all that Yahawashi had done with them, and how he had opened the door of faith unto the Gentiles. The Gentiles, Israelite foreigners, okay, Israelites that were in those other lands, Israelites that were worshiping the gods of Jupiter and Mercury, okay, those were Israelites in Asia, okay. And it says how he had opened the door of faith unto the Gentiles, which is giving them Yahawashi, the spirit of Yahawashi, working those miracles. And then when they seen that, then they started believing, and he set up churches and elders to run those churches, to give men the faith of Yahawashi. It says, and there they abode long time with the disciples. So, you know, it's beautiful. The book of Acts, the 14th chapter. You know, this is another edition of History and the Law. Until the next episode, Shalom. You know, all praises to Yahawashi, double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and salutations to you brothers that's pushing the word in sincerity and in truth. Shalom.